3 months have passed since the beginning of the Iron Swords War, which began with a vicious surprise attack by Hamas on southern Israel, an attack that claimed the lives of hundreds and in which more than 200 people, including women, children, elderly, and foreigners, were kidnapped to Gaza by terror organizations. Welcome everyone to this briefing. I'm Eli Klutstein, JPC's Media and Content Director. Today we host Mr. Eylon Levy, the Israeli government spokesperson, who will talk about the latest developments of the war, its goals, the different fronts, and more. Hello, Eylon. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, thank you very much. It's been 3 months now since Hamas declared war with the October 7 massacre, and I want to use today's event to lay out our assessment of the progress of this war before, of course, we move on to your questions at the end. Soon after the Hamas invasion and barbaric atrocities that started this war on October 7, we defined our goals as threefold: destroying Hamas, releasing all the hostages, and ensuring that the day after Hamas, Gaza can never again serve as a base of attacks against our people. 3 months on, we have not yet achieved those goals, and on the hostage issue in particular, the fact that more than half of the hostages are still trapped in the Hamas terror dungeons is a source of acute pain and frustration for the Israeli people. But Israel has clearly far surpassed expectations at this critical 3-month mark, and I want to lay out our assessment. We'll start with destroying Hamas. Israel has significantly degraded Hamas's terror infrastructure, and in the case of the whole northern Gaza region, completely dismantled it. Critics at the start of the war said it couldn't be done. We did it, and after repairing our border defenses and securing Israeli territory after the massacre. Now, across Gaza, we've identified over 1,500 Hamas tunnel shafts and routes, most of those hidden in schools, hospitals, mosques, UN facilities, and civilian buildings. They include, of course, the 4-kilometer-long tunnel near Erez, which I visited just yesterday. We've demolished Hamas's command centers under Jabalia, Issa, and Gaza City. These were complex, multi-story mazes built underground. They are no more, and Hamas's command abilities in those regions are also no more. We've also successfully targeted and eliminated senior Hamas military leadership, killing at least 8,000 Hamas terrorists in targeted strikes, and of course injuring many more than reflected in that 8,000 count. We've killed, at the last count I've seen, half of Hamas's battalion commanders, and in some cases their replacements, as well as commanders of Hamas's aerial array, drone operations, UAVs, surface-to-air missiles, advanced warning systems, and more. Hamas terrorists know that they have two options: surrender peacefully or die in battle, and many of them are choosing wisely to surrender. We've apprehended over 700 Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists, including many who did surrender, and our interrogations have yielded valuable intelligence that have been helping us to target Hamas with precision. And when we talk about 9,000 killed or apprehended, that's from an estimated fighting force of 30,000, which is, of course, no mean feat at all. As for the Hamas missile threat, a reminder that the Hamas threat did not begin on October 7th. We have intercepted the large majority of Hamas missiles. That has saved Israeli towns and cities from potentially cataclysmic damage and saved thousands of lives. We've also dramatically reduced Hamas's ability to keep shooting, and the frequency of missile fire has plummeted. Not only have we pushed Hamas out of northern Gaza, we've also seized and destroyed over 40,000 Hamas weapons, including anti-tank missiles and rocket launchers, in addition to targeting those rocket launchers right before they could be used against us, and of course destroying the weapon silos and rocket manufacturing facilities as well. We've exposed to the whole world the breadth and depth of the Hamas human shield strategy, including the tunnel shafts located in civilian sites, including under children's beds. Most notably, we have exposed with extensive video and photographic evidence the weapon stockpiles in schools, in kindergartens, in mosques, in homes, and we showed the whole world how Hamas turned hospitals into military bases, as noted and confirmed by foreign intelligence. We also successfully dismantled the Shifa terror complex with minimal damage to the hospital structure above ground. And we did all this not only while exposing but also thwarting Hamas's human shield strategy, making unprecedented efforts to minimize harm to civilians in what is a uniquely challenging environment. An urban environment designed by an enemy that has deliberately embedded itself under civilian buildings, enjoying the tacit collaboration of UN agencies that funneled civilians into Hamas strongholds instead of into the designated humanitarian zone. We successfully evacuated almost the entire population of northern Gaza so that Hamas could not hide behind them as human shields. We secured humanitarian corridors and tactical pauses to get them out of harm's way. We dropped 7 million leaflets, placed 70,000 individual phone calls, sent 14 million text messages, another 14 million voice messages, and I think it's fair to assess we have made more warnings for civilians to evacuate than all armies in the history of counter-terror warfare combined. And if we're wrong on that assessment, we're happy for you to fact-check and set the record straight. On the humanitarian front, we facilitated the delivery of over 130,000 tons of humanitarian aid and have doubled our capacity to inspect aid trucks. Let me be clear, because I've seen some misleading headlines in recent days. Israel has excess capacity to inspect and process trucks. There is no backlog and no limitation on our end. In fact, our efforts have been so successful that under the agreement with the United Nations, Egypt and the United States, Kerem Shalom and the Nitzana crossings are closed once a week on weekends in order to enable the UN to distribute the goods that are piling up on their side. We've also helped the British government secure a direct humanitarian land corridor from Jordan, which is, of course, an indirect way of saying through Israel. We've coordinated the establishment of 2 field hospitals, facilitated the departure of over 1,600 ill and wounded Gazans for medical treatment abroad, and of course have excess capacity for as much international humanitarian aid to enter Gaza as the world wants to send, and the United Nations is able to process. As for the hostages, an issue of intense pain and frustration for the Israeli public. While we continue to fight to put unrelenting military pressure on Hamas to release the remaining 136 hostages in its terror dungeons, we know that this strategy forced Hamas to agree to the last hostage release pause and let go of 110 hostages before it decided to resume hostilities on December 1st. Tragically, that was too late for the 8 hostages murdered in the Hamas terror dungeons, whose bodies have since been recovered, the 23 hostages whose bodies Hamas is still holding for a ransom, and the 3 hostages erroneously shot by our forces in a tragic incident. We will bring to justice the Hamas rapist regime for the harm that has befallen the hostages, and we will continue placing unrelenting military pressure and exploring every avenue to rescue and secure the release of the rest. And throughout all of this, critically, we have maintained the support of key allies to defeat Hamas, while helping foreign intelligence thwart Hamas terror attacks in their own countries. Our allies understand that we are all on the same side, especially as the Houthi pirate threat rears its ugly head. The allies that stood by our side on October 7 are still firm in their resolve that this war must end with the end of Hamas. The United States has stood foursquare behind us, providing us with critical moral, material, and diplomatic support, which they continue to emphasize on a daily basis. And the leaders of the UK, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, to name just a few, have also made clear that Hamas must lay down its arms, and there is no room for Hamas in a post-war Gaza after the October 7 atrocities. Washington has made clear on every occasion it will not rest until all the hostages are released, and that this war can end tomorrow if Hamas surrenders now, and that the United States will continue to provide critical assistance to Israel to ensure that the atrocities of October 7 can never recur. I refer you also to the words from the German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock visiting Israel just now, saying that if Hamas did not fanatically pursue this senseless struggle, this war would long have been finished, telling Israel you can rely strongly on our solidarity in the fight against the blind terror that seeks to wipe Israel off the map. The free world understands that anything short of a total Israeli victory after the 10/7 atrocities would leave Hamas free and emboldened to attack again, thinking it has the support of the international community, and that anything short of a total Israeli victory would fuel violent extremism around the world, the same sort of violent extremism we have been helping to thwart on the streets of Western capitals. We are winning, and they are winning, betting on the winning horse. That's it for our update and the assessment, and now we'll gladly take your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Eylon. One reporter is asking, after all of this introduction, and after we heard Defense Minister Gallant today saying that not the objectives of the war is going to change, but the method. So are the goals of eradicating Hamas, of stopping the missile threat from Gaza. We know that we did eliminate some of the Hamas leadership in the northern part of the strip. Is this going to change? Are the goals going to change?
The goals of the war remain the same: destroy Hamas, release all the hostages, and ensure that Gaza can never again be used as a giant launch pad for attacks against the Israeli people, not as it was used on October 7th and not as it was used in the previous 20 years of rocket fire. Now, Defense Minister Gallant has outlined his guiding principles for the next stages of the war. He has spoken about those guiding principles that in phase 3 in northern Gaza, we're going to continue fighting to erode the remaining hotspots of terror. There are still pockets of Hamas fighting forces in there, but they are uncoordinated and without an overall superstructure. And in the south, we will continue focusing on eliminating the Hamas leadership and enabling the return of the hostages. Defense Minister Gallant has also spoken about phase 4, the day after Hamas, and he's emphasized that there will be no Israeli civilian presence inside the Gaza Strip the day after the war. We have no interest either in occupying or governing the Gaza Strip. We think it is right that Gaza be governed by Palestinians, and they should govern it in a way that does not give them the means to launch atrocities against our people. The defense minister has spoken about the importance of Israel inspecting goods entering the Gaza Strip. We have to make sure that neither Hamas, which will not exist after this war, or other terror organizations are able to rearm, and has spoken of his vision as well of a US-led multinational task force in participation with our European allies and regional partners, taking responsibility for the rehabilitation of the Gaza Strip and making sure that it can be rebuilt in a way that ensures sustainable reconstruction without diversion towards terrorism ends. I visited just yesterday the giant Hamas terror tunnel 400 meters away from the Erez crossing, and you really have to visit it for yourself to understand just how much concrete was supposed to go to the houses and hospitals above ground and got poured into the Hamas terror tunnels. All that international aid money that went straight down the drain, down the toilet, into the Hamas sewers and terror tunnels. And we hope to work with our international partners who will be the address for the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip to make sure that that can never happen again.
Okay, thank you. David Brennan from Newsweek is asking about the Lebanese armed forces. And we know that the Washington Post and CNN reported several instances in which the IDF targeted them and their position in southern Lebanon. Does this mean that Israel considers the Lebanese forces a legitimate target as it seeks to push Hezbollah away from the northern border? And to what extent is the Lebanese forces complicit in Hezbollah's presence along the frontier?
Specific strategic operational questions, I'll refer you to the IDF spokesperson's unit, but the political leadership has been clear. Hezbollah is dragging Lebanon now into a totally unnecessary war, the war that Hamas began. It is risking dragging Lebanon into the sort of ruin that the people of Lebanon do not deserve, that we do not deserve. The situation in the north is intolerable now, with 80,000 Israelis who have been displaced from their homes that Hezbollah is shelling relentlessly. And we're now at a fork of the roads. Either Hezbollah backs away, or we will push it away. Either it backs off or it will be pushed away. There is now a very narrow window of diplomatic opportunity for the world to secure the enforcement of UN Security Council Resolution 1701 and push Hezbollah away from the border. Hezbollah's systematic aggression has rendered that Security Council resolution null and void, and we need to see Hezbollah pushed away from the border, because after October 7th, we know that every day that terror organizations sit along our borders is October 6th, and we cannot take the risk of such atrocities repeating themselves on Israel's northern border. And if Hezbollah drags us into a full-scale war, and we do not want to fight a war on two fronts, we will hold the Lebanese state accountable, and the consequences will be severe. But we are hopeful there is still time for a diplomatic window to push Hezbollah away, and that will obviate the need for military force in order to push away this Iranian-backed proxy that is a permanent threat of another October 7th on a much larger scale on the Lebanese border.
Okay, thank you. Dan Williams from Reuters is asking about the geopolitical front. He's asking who will argue on Israel's behalf on the ICJ hearing this week, if it is going to be Malcolm Shaw, and if so, who is the second lawyer? And he's also asking about the visit of Secretary of State Blinken tonight, and is his shuttle diplomacy productive, and what is Israel's message to the U.S.?
Dan, on the first question about the ICJ, we have no details at the moment on this legal matter. We expect that details will be forthcoming from the legal team within the next day or two. As for Secretary Blinken, who has visited here many times and expressed Washington's fervent support for our campaign to destroy Hamas in the wake of the 10/7 massacre, I think Secretary Blinken spoke for himself when he said we have an intense focus on preventing this conflict from spreading. We are focusing on destroying the October 7 monsters at the moment and ensuring that no such atrocities can ever be perpetrated from Gaza again. We do not want the conflict to escalate further. We think it is deeply regrettable that Hezbollah has entered this war on Hamas's side and is dragging Lebanon into a totally unnecessary war, the war that Hamas began. We hope that the Secretary of State will be able to operate within that narrow diplomatic window of opportunity to secure an effective diplomatic resolution to keep Hezbollah away from our northern border, stop the ongoing shelling of Israeli homes, lift the threat of a repeat October 7th on the Lebanese border, and allow 80,000 Israelis to return to their homes, because the situation there is intolerable. And we hope, of course, that the war that Hamas began can end with Hamas, will not escalate further. And the United States, which has backed us to the hilt on Gaza, will of course play a critical role in those diplomatic efforts.
Okay. Tia Goldenberg from AP is asking, is Israel concerned that the ICJ will issue an interim order to stop the war?
I can't comment anything on the legal situation at the moment, other than to say, repeat our statement that we are abhorred that South Africa has chosen to play advocate for the devil, that it was Hamas that perpetrated an act of genocide on October 7th, and that we hold South Africa to be criminally complicit with the Hamas rapist regime in its decision to provide it political and legal cover.
Okay. Lizzie Porter from The Telegraph is asking about the U.S. request or pushing Israel to allow displaced residents of northern Gaza to return to their homes. Will Israel allow that? And what information also do you have about the aid corridor with the UK from Jordan?
As for the question about displaced Gazans returning to their homes, we don't have an exact timetable. But of course, we hope that when this war is over with the eventual and ultimate defeat of Hamas, the Gaza Strip will be rebuilt in a way that ensures that concrete goes to people's homes and not into the terror tunnels that Hamas built under the noses of the international community and the UN, diverting aid money away from its recipients, all in the service of its human shield strategy in order to try to use civilians above ground to protect its assets below ground. This is still an active war zone. We have completely dismantled Hamas's military infrastructure in northern Gaza, but we are still encountering pockets of fighting, and that situation is ongoing, but we don't have an exact timetable. The second question regarding the land corridor from Jordan, somewhat unusual way to say transporting aid through Israel. We repeat, and this is particularly relevant for the AP article that came out the other day, unfortunately, full of a number of erroneous claims. Israel has excess capacity to inspect aid trucks. We've more than doubled our capacity, and we can more than double the amount of aid entering both through Kerem Shalom and inspected at the Nitzana crossing. The backlog that the senators spoke of in that article is a backlog after the Israeli inspections. There are no limitations on our part on the amount of humanitarian aid that can enter Gaza. We've been exploring various options with our partners for ways to get aid into Gaza, including through Cyprus. We hope one day it will be possible to secure a direct passage after inspections in Cyprus. I've seen that aid deliveries have already begun after inspections there going directly to Egypt. And we continue to allow humanitarian aid to enter the Gaza Strip after inspections that we have to conduct to make sure that Hamas isn't able to exploit that to rearm. And we remain committed to ensuring that humanitarian aid can reach the civilians in Gaza who need it and make sure that Hamas cannot steal it, even though it has been well documented by now with ample photographic video evidence and eyewitness testimonies from Gazans on the ground that Hamas has been hijacking aid trucks. And we think it's regrettable that there is any coverage of the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip that does not mention that the de facto authorities in Gaza are hijacking humanitarian aid in order to prioritize their fighters, and all this with the total complicity of UN agencies that are covering up for Hamas and the chorus of human rights organizations that are diverting blame onto Israel instead of pointing the finger at the terrorists hijacking aid trucks.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Hannah Julian from the Jewish Press about the situation on the ground at the moment at the West Bank. We saw several incidents yesterday. Are we afraid that things are going to heat up there? And do the Israeli government see a possibility of another October 7th amendment like coming from these areas in the control of the PA?
It's clear that when Hamas launched the October 7 atrocities, it was hoping to launch a multi-front war. That was why it urged Palestinians in the West Bank to take weapons and join in the violence. Hamas has for years been trying to escalate this conflict to Judea and Samaria as well, and to inflame tensions over there. On October 7th, it took it up a notch by encouraging Palestinians to join those atrocities. And our goal at the moment is to prevent this conflict from spreading, to prevent it from spreading to the northern border, and to prevent it from spreading to Judea and Samaria as well. And our forces have been taking action there to arrest terror operatives and prevent the widening of the war that Hamas began and is desperately trying to escalate in order to draw fire away from Gaza, where its forces are getting thumped.
Okay, thank you. We had another question coming in about the issue of the day after the war. We heard some heads of clans in Gaza saying that they won't take part in this issue, and we know there were several political difficulties in Israel surrounding this issue. Do we have anything new about this? Any concrete plan?
The day after Gaza, the Prime Minister has laid out what we're calling the 3D vision for peace. In order for there to be peace between Israel and Gaza, three things have to happen, and we hope to work with the international community to achieve them: destroying Hamas, demilitarizing Gaza, and de-radicalizing Palestinian society. And we need the world to get serious about that, because if another generation of Palestinian children are brought up in the child soldier boot camps that we've been exposing over recent days on a diet of hate and indoctrination in UN-run schools, we will find ourselves in a cycle of violence again. We have to address the root cause of this conflict, which is the total blanket refusal of the Palestinian people to accept a Jewish state in any borders whatsoever in the land of Israel. And as long as the next generation is brought up to embrace a diet of martyrdom and jihad and violent extremism, we fear we will be condemned to further cycles of violence. Now, as for the question of the distribution of humanitarian aid, our position is that Gaza should be run by Gazans. Gaza should be run by the Palestinians. We will not accept the introduction of any foreign element that will fuel and fund terrorism as opposed to fighting it. We're exploring various mechanisms together with our partners for how the needs of the civilian population should be addressed. And I think that actually the extent of the terror tunnel network that we have been exposing underneath Gaza, the hundreds upon hundreds and hundreds of miles of tunnels, have shown that actually in recent years, first of all, Gaza had the resources it needed for extensive building works. And two, the Palestinian people in Gaza have shown themselves amply capable of conducting very impressive building projects indeed and taking care of their needs. It's just a tragedy that they chose to prioritize the October 7 massacres instead of sustainable reconstruction inside the Gaza Strip. And we hope that the day after Hamas, the international partners that will be working together with Palestinians living inside the Gaza Strip will be able to ensure that the Gaza Strip is governed in a way by Palestinians that ensures that aid reaches the people who need it, that homes are built without tunnels underneath children's beds. That's very important. And if that happens, then we will be able to turn a new leaf and hopefully embrace a new future of peace, prosperity, and opportunity with the Gaza Strip in the day after Hamas, and we'll be able to look back in these days as one terrible, long nightmare.
Okay, Aaron Forrest from the Media Line is asking in the same topic, what role do the Abraham Accords countries play in that plan, if at all?
We think that regional partners can play a critical role. I'm not going to get into details about precisely who is involved and in what format, but it is clear that we're going to have to work together with the United States, European partners, and regional allies as well, the allies that are interested in peace and reconciliation and normalization in the region, which, despite this attack by Hamas, an Iranian proxy, remains the trend in which the Middle East has been moving in recent years. And hopefully the day after Hamas, the day after we destroy this terror organization, that, let's remember, is part of a broader axis that includes the Houthi pirate regime, Hezbollah in the north, the Assad regime, the militias in Iraq, all these countries that are actively attacking the moderate Arab neighbors in the region as well. Our regional partners will be able to play a key role in continuing that momentum of stability and normalization in our region.
Okay, a Japanese reporter is asking, is there any sign of Hamas coming closer to surrendering? And how extensive is their ability to continue fighting the IDF at the moment?
A question on Hamas surrendering. On the one hand, we're seeing Hamas terrorists surrendering in increasing numbers. We saw the images of the terrorists surrendering with arms above their heads in the Kamal Adwan hospital. We've said we've apprehended at least 700 Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists, many of whom surrendered themselves. Those fighters who are still on the ground find themselves encircled by IDF forces, cut off from the leadership that has abandoned them. Know they have two options: to surrender peacefully or die in battle. Or worse, to face the wrath of the people of Gaza when they have to give accountability for the ruin they have rained on Gaza, and many of them are choosing to surrender. But please feel free to speak to me later, and I will refer you to statements by Hamas leaders who have made clear their desire to sacrifice civilians and to sacrifice themselves. We are dealing with a death cult. We are dealing with a Hamas death cult that idolizes martyrdom and jihad, and does not think in terms of the normal human values that are recognizable to you or me. So is there any prospect that the Hamas leaders themselves are going to surrender? We urge them to do so, to surrender and save their skins. But otherwise, we're going to continue this war to target every single Hamas October 7th monster, every single terrorist who is planning another October 7th, warning them that every Hamas terrorist is a dead man walking.
Okay, Barbara Diamond is asking, what would Israel actually do with members of Hamas if they should actually surrender?
We've apprehended many Hamas terrorists who have surrendered, and they will, of course, be brought to justice before a court of law.
Okay. Lazar Berman from Times of Israel is asking, how confident are you that the US and other international players can actually help hammer out a diplomatic solution to Hezbollah's presence over the northern border? And if not, is war inevitable? And how long can we keep up waiting for a diplomatic solution?
Our confidence in diplomatic solutions is unfortunately weak, and that is a lesson borne by experience. UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which ended the 2006 war, was never enforced. Hezbollah never retreated beyond the Litani River, and it continues to shell Israeli homes, in some cases from meters away from UN positions, treating that resolution as nothing more than a wet cloth, and treating UNIFIL soldiers as human shields. We think there is a narrow window of diplomatic opportunity to push Hezbollah away, to make sure that Hezbollah, its Iranian warlord patrons, and the people and government of Lebanon understand what an unnecessary war Hezbollah is dragging them into. But we are under no illusions. We are preparing for all scenarios and repeat the warning that either Hezbollah backs off, preferably as part of a diplomatic solution, or we will push it away.
Okay, another reporter is asking, will Israel take any action against UNRWA in Gaza now or in the day after the war?
The foreign minister has already spoken, the outgoing foreign minister, Eli Cohen, spoken of his objection to further funding towards UNRWA. We think that the organization has been covering up for Hamas, most notably that famous tweet from October 15th, 16th, when it said that Hamas had stolen fuel from its stockpiles, then deleted that tweet, and then denied reports on social media, which are, of course, its own tweets. UNRWA is an organization that exists to perpetuate the Palestinian refugee problem rather than solve it, and as such, it is broadly part of the problem rather than part of the solution. And we're working together with international partners to ensure that the day after Hamas, we can focus on the Prime Minister's 3D vision for peace: destroy Hamas, demilitarize Gaza, and de-radicalize the Palestinian population.
Thank you. Dan Williams from Reuters is asking us about a specific incident. The World Health Organization says it canceled a planned mission to the El Auda hospital and the central drug store in the northern Gaza for the fourth time since December 26th, because it did not receive deconfliction and safety guarantees from Israel. This, it says, has denied the area urgently needs medical supplies to sustain the operations of 5 hospitals. Do you have any response to that?
Yeah, and this is, of course, the same World Health Organization that has vociferously covered up Hamas's militarization of hospitals, that in the face of all the available evidence refuses to believe that Hamas built terror infrastructure underneath hospitals and has made itself complicit with Hamas's war of propaganda against us by covering up the use of hospitals and military bases. The same World Health Organization that I was shocked to see just over the weekend admitted that it had delivered medical supplies to the Hamas-run Ministry of Health, the World Health Organization, a UN body, admitting that it delivered supplies to an internationally recognized terrorist organization. As for the specific incident, I have no information at the moment. Specific operational matters, I'll refer you to the IDF spokesperson's unit, and we can try to get you an answer, but I'm not familiar with any specifics of that particular incident.
Okay, thank you. Another question: there are rumors that Yahya Sinwar has been located and has surrounded himself with Israeli hostages. Can you confirm that report, and what would Israel do about that?
I'm, of course, not going to reveal sensitive intelligence in a press briefing with the Jerusalem Press Club. Rest assured, we have fearsome intelligence, and all Hamas terrorists know that they are dead men walking and have 2 options: to surrender peacefully or to die in battle.
Okay, can you elaborate on the meetings between hostages' families in Qatar?
No, that would be a question for the specific hostages' families. We, of course, continue to make every effort to bring back the remaining hostages. We're talking about 136 vulnerable people still trapped in the Hamas terror dungeons. Not 136 vulnerable, 24 of them have already been murdered, and Hamas is holding their bodies. Time is running out for them. Time has already run out for many of them. We continue to explore every avenue to bring those hostages home safely to their families. And we repeat our demand that the Red Cross must put pressure on Hamas, the Red Cross that has publicly admitted that it is not even bothering to put pressure on Hamas. It must start, and we expect as a specific action item our allies and foreign governments to pressure the Red Cross, to pressure Hamas, and to pressure Hamas and its supporters directly to secure immediate Red Cross access to those vulnerable hostages. We're talking not only to children, many women, after the reports we've seen of sexual abuse in the Hamas terror dungeons, elderly people without their medication, young people without their asthma inhalers, and of course, as in the case of Hirsch Goldberg-Polin and many others, people who were abducted into the Gaza Strip with horrific injuries, such as Hirsch, who had his arm blown off, and his mother has spoken so movingly and powerfully, trying to get international attention to their cause.
Okay, the last question we have now, because we're about to finish, our time is up. What steps are being taken to take out Hamas leadership abroad, and especially their massive financial coffers and international land holdings, investments, and etc.?
We have no specific comment on that, but as the Prime Minister and Defense Minister have made clear on multiple occasions, every Hamas terrorist is a dead man walking.
Okay, thank you very much, Eylon, for being with us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please stay tuned for more JPC events in the near future, and may you all have a great day.
Thank you, and everyone keep safe, please. Thank you.